Good morning and welcome to COBRA on this rather chilly morning. It's great to have you on the show. We've got a very exciting show with Allon Raiz, probably the leading entrepreneur in South Africa. COBRA is a pro bono initiative co-founded by Schindler's Attorneys, IQ Business and Engaged Business Turnaround, offering pro bono assistance, yes, free assistance, whether it's financial, legal, consulting, business turnaround advice. Please come to COBRA. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're talking entrepreneurship with Allon Raiz. Allon, great to have you on the show. Allon has a phenomenal CV. Many would know him, of course, as the CEO of Rates Corp, which currently supports over 500 businesses, astonishing, all around Africa and South Africa. Allon is the author of 3 entrepreneurial books, including the best-selling Lose the Business Plan and What to Do When You Want to Give Up. Allon hosted the first national radio show on entrepreneurship in South Africa in 2004 and wrote and hosted the first South African primetime entrepreneurship reality TV show. Allon is currently hosting his 8th season of the popular The Big Small Business Show on Business Day TV. He has been a regular columnist for Entrepreneur magazine and has a weekly radio slot on Power FM. Allon is co-founder of the entrepreneurship organization South Africa and Rural Roots, and is on the advisory and judging boards of numerous local and international NGOs and entrepreneurial awards. His passion for and focus on the development of entrepreneurs attracted the attention of the World Economic Forum, which in 2008 recognized Allon as a young global leader. As an accomplished international speaker, Allon was invited to speak at the 2011 World Economic Forum annual meeting held in Davos, Switzerland. In 2011, he was also invited to become a member of the WEF's Global Agenda Council on Fostering Entrepreneurship, making him one of only 15 recognized global experts in the field. More recently, he became a member of the WEF's Global Future Council. In 2013, Allon received the Entrepreneur of the Year Award at the Oliver Transformation and Empowerment Awards. In 2014, Allon was guest lecturer at the annual Oxford University, where he's said to be the in-house resident entrepreneur at the business school. In 2015, Allon received an invitation from the White House on behalf of President Barack Obama to speak at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit held in Kenya. Allon, that's an astonishing CV, and we're all looking forward to hearing what you have to say about guiding your way through this pandemic as an entrepreneur. Allon, over to you.
Thanks so much for that intro, Gary. And I'm just going to share my screen now, and let's hope the technology is all working. So I'm just going to push share, and you tell me if we've got it right. Gary, do we have contact?
Yeah, all good, Allon. All good.
All right.
Your screen is sharing. Thank you.
Right, great. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for taking the time out to listen today. I'm involved, as Gary pointed out, with a number of businesses, and there are really 2 parts to our business. One is where we support entrepreneurs, and the other is where we take equity in small businesses to scale them. And what happened in the first part of COVID, when we went into lockdown, is I started a weekly session with my CEOs where I would have a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting with them once a week to try and sort of get them to be able to frame what was going on in a different way. And for me, it was a very important part of how we navigated it, particularly the first stages of the lockdown and of COVID. I think this COVID thing is here for a long while still, and its ramifications forever. And so the big part of what today is about is how to frame the thinking for a new reality. So what you're seeing right now is effectively a slide deck that I presented to my CEOs, and I'm now sharing that with you. So let's see how this works. So let's go for the context first. So what's the context that we're in right now? So we've all heard of this black swan event, and I'm an avid reader of Nassim Taleb's, and I prescribe to his way of thinking. And for those of you you've heard the term but don't really understand it, what Taleb says is that effectively, if the world was filled with just swans that came in one color, white, then swans, that's what swans were until a black swan arrives in the world. And now it's an extraordinary event. But after that, swans come in two colors. They come in black and white. They just come in more of them come in the color that you understood them to be. But the moment that first swan, that black swan arrives, it's a shock and it's horror and it's all sorts of things until you understand now that swans come in two colors. So what's important here is that, you know, I think in his book, it was called Fooled by Randomness. And I'm paraphrasing here. I read it a long time ago. But my memory of that was that there's a story about an ant. An ant lives for 9 days. So if an ant is born, right at the beginning of summer, his dad would say, "Son, you know, the world is hot." And then the son would experience the world is hot, and he would have a son, and he would tell his son that the world is hot, and so on and so forth. And that would be the rule that happened. That would be the rule of life. Life is hot, and my father, grandfather, great-grandfather, they all said so, and I've experienced it, so it must be true. Until one ant is born, the first ant is born in winter. And the first ant that's born in winter is the ant that now experiences a different reality. So what Taleb says is that the issue here is that our time scale that we are understanding so-called truths is too short. When you open up the time scale, you start to see things in a different perspective. And now what you think are black swan events are actually not black swan events, they're cyclical. So when you think about that, you go back to 1908 and 1957, when we had the two prior global pandemics, and you try and understand. What I tried to do there is try and understand what was going on in the world at that time. What happened in 1909? What happened in 1958? What happened post those pandemics? Now, it's important to note that the world was very different in 1908. We certainly didn't have Zoom, and we didn't have the level of communication we've got now, or the ability to have a medical response that we've had now. But there's some patterns that you can glean from the past that are starting to repeat, and I'll talk about some of those now. The second thing there on the right is that at some point in this journey, the oil futures were at minus $37.10 at one point. Now, just let me put that in a practical way. That means that somebody would pay you $37.10 to take away their oil. Now, if you went to your grandfather and you said to your grandfather, "Granddad, people are paying me to take away their oil," he would think you're a little daft, because that's not practical. They're a commodity. To somebody to pay you to take away commodity. It's the same thing if I said to you, now people would be paying you to take away diamonds or gold. That's conceptually very hard for you to conceive. So these things started to give us clues that, first of all, they're patterns, and second of all, that these rules are breaking, these things are breaking, and what is true and what is not true. And I've highlighted the ING there because I still think that the rules continue to be broken. They're continuously breaking, even as far in as we are right now into the COVID crisis. So I'm of the view that I'm what they call a strategic opportunist, but I'm going to talk about that just now. And so there's very much two schools of thought in terms of business. Of course, there are more, but just I'm generalizing now. So the one is that this is a strategic effort. That if I'm strategic and I rub my chin a lot and I think about things a lot, then I'm far better off to build a business if I'm strategic than if I'm opportunistic. Opportunistic is almost like a trader. I see an opportunity, I take the gap, I trade that opportunity. And in my world, certainly with all the entrepreneurs that I've been exposed to, they very much fit into those two categories quite easily. There's the individuals who want to build their business strategically, and then there are the opportunists. Our tender entrepreneurs are a classic example of an opportunist who might not have a particular skill, but can broker a deal because of either legitimate or illegitimate relationships that are involved. But that's the opportunist side. So what's happened now, what's been happening now is that the debate around strategy versus opportunism is leaning towards opportunism. And you're seeing everyone getting into masks and everyone getting into hand sanitizer. And I'm of the strong view that you should not be doing this unless there are certain conditions present, which I'll talk about just now. The other two things that are happening is time is getting reduced in a crisis, and I don't want to call this a crisis. I want to call this a system shock. In a system shock, time reduces and money reduces. So, time we pretty much understood. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it all seems the same. But anyone who's been trying to build a business now, it feels like your days, you spend the whole day in front of the laptop, and it feels like you sit in the morning, and in an hour later it's like 8 o'clock at night. So time is shrinking, and of course money is under a big duress right now as well. What was happening prior to this? Prior to this, the system shock, human beings, as a matter of survival, they like to predict the future. It's, what's the weather like, so that I can plan for the week, or what do you think the rainfall will be this year, so that I can know when to plant. And our ability to predict had a big correlation to our survival as individuals, as communities, etc. So we have this obsession around predictability. And if you look at our world is filled with predicted tools all over the place. You've got economists who are effectively people who are trying to tell us what the future is probably going to look like. And so we live in this, and this is a lovely diagram here, that there's a horizon of predictability when we sort of know. So I can go onto my phone now and tell you what the weather will be like today and tomorrow, and what is the probability of rain, etc. So I know whether to take an umbrella or a rain jacket tomorrow or not. And if I don't take a rain jacket or umbrella, I'm probably going to get sick, and then I might get pneumonia. That's not good for me. So human beings need this predictability, and we sort of operated in this environment where the further along in time it was, the less predictable the world was, and we accepted that. And what I was speaking about earlier, the compromise, you could compromise easily. You could choose a compromise easily between opportunity and strategy. So a strategic view in a time of a system shock seems also irrational, because all the knowns become unknown. All the things that you think were true, all the things that you were able to predict to a large degree of accuracy, now are out the window. If you were a strategic thinker in the oil industry, minus $37.10 is not something that you had in your calculations at all. It's something you couldn't envisage at all. So this, prior to COVID, it was much easier to be strategic than it is now. And as I said to you earlier, I think for me, the compromise was strategically opportunistic, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more just now. I'm wanting to do Q&A, so I'm going to rush through this presentation so that I can rather engage you. I'm far more comfortable engaging through questions than presenting. So let's talk about a new framework to build a post-COVID business. So the first thing that happened when this whole thing broke was I picked up the phone and called my mentor, who's in his 70s, is extremely successful. And I said to him, so what do I do? And his words were, how the hell should I know? I've never seen this before either. And to me, that was a big shock, because here is a 70-plus-year-old man who's been my mentor for the last 30 years, is super successful. He should know. And when he turns around and says, I don't know, then, the butterflies start to take flight in your stomach. But what he did say was one thing which I want to say to all of you, which is that if your mindset, he said, your mindset needs to be that your ship has come in. Your mindset needs to be that your ship has come in. If you see this as a great threat and you are focusing on the life rafts, you're focusing on the dinghy, you're focusing on getting off this thing, if you go into this retraction, into this defensiveness, then you're going to miss the ship that's come in. And if you look, and coming back to the 1908 and the 1957, about the empires that are built in this time, the thing about what COVID does is the great equalizer. Big corporates and small businesses alike are affected. We will see huge empires fall right now and empires rise. You will see small businesses becoming great empires globally from this time as a result of this time, because of the fact that all this, the tectonic plates have shifted, and these big empires will collapse. And you will see that in various industries across the world. So the first thing I did with my CEOs is I said to them, I want you to take your company name and I want you to call it, that company name, international. Because from now on, there's no such thing as geography. What we've seen now is that here I am, I'm sitting at my home and I'm talking to I don't know how many people now, and it's going onto Facebook, it's going to go probably onto LinkedIn, onto many other channels, and I can speak to people across the world. Now that's been around for a while, but during this COVID time, I've done a talk in Uganda, I've done a talk in Egypt, I've done a talk in Cote d'Ivoire, and in none of those did I get on a plane and get a visa and fly there and stay in those countries. But that was all organized there. The audience were all local audience. The local individuals organized it, and I came in to be the speaker for that event. So I'm now able to get into markets just from a speaking point of view that I previously found very difficult to do, especially from a time point of view. So when you start to think of your company as whatever your company name is, international, you start to break the concept of your market being local. And this is a big driver that I've had with all the businesses I'm involved in. So I'm going to give you an example of that. One of the businesses that I'm involved in does accounting, bookkeeping services for small to medium-sized businesses. So I said to his name is George, I said, George, now you have to see yourself as your company name international. And I want you to look at the UK market and New Zealand and Australia, etc., as potential markets for you, because you're currently all working on the same platform, which is zero accounting, and that is common in these environments. And now start to go after those companies in those countries. And that's been an incredibly successful strategy for him. And as he builds more and more confidence, now he knows now he has to build a new competency, which he has to make sure that his SEO, search engine optimization, is right for international. He is spending his advertising on AdWords and targeting those countries. And then he needs to be able to fulfill on that. He needs to be able, from a New Zealand to South Africa is different time line. So he needs to be able to ensure that he can service. So his fulfillment needs to be in place. And if you were a company that had product, you'd need to be able to deliver that product. You've got issues around payment in terms of setting up the payment methodologies. So you have to get your fulfillment right. So there's an adaptation around the fulfillment. And then you have to understand that you can do this across both product and service. And once that you get into your head that the market is no longer, if you're in Johannesburg, or in South Africa, that your market is now global, your ship has come in. That in fact, your eyes are opened. And now, if you can overcome the ability to market, to fulfill in this environment, you now are on an international platform. On the bottom of your screen there, this presentation was done over a month ago, and I'm sure the numbers have changed. But I love this example of a guy who is a plumber, who fixes pipes and leaks and drains and all sorts of things for a living. And he couldn't go out during lockdown, and so he turned around and he said, "Okay, what do I have? I have the skill, I have the ability to talk, I've got a video camera, etc. Why don't I teach people how to fix their own drains and fix pipes and do all sorts of things?" And almost overnight, this guy achieved, at this point, 167,000 followers. And I'm sure it's probably closer to 300 or 400,000 followers right now, which then he can monetize, and he started to put product placements, etc. And here's another great example of an individual who says, it's okay, my ship has come in. I've gone from a plumber to basically an online plumbing celebrity. And there's great examples of other people who've done the same thing. You've just re-looked at what they have in a different way. This one's a little bit more interesting. So what we see in the business world is, once again, two general categories. People are either producers of value or arbitrageurs of value. They trade value. So I either produce the face masks, or I buy and sell the face masks. I either produce something or I buy and sell it. But what I've started to see now, and I think will be a trend for the future, is that organizations are both producers and arbitrageurs of value. So a great example is in my personal story. My parents made umbrellas. They made rain umbrellas and garden umbrellas, etc. And when the Chinese started to produce very cheaply, they had a choice. They had a factory of over 300 people, and they produced umbrellas. So they were producers of value. And then they realized that you could bring in an umbrella at the same quality from China cheaper than you can manufacture it here in South Africa, for all the known reasons. So what they did is, instead of moving over to fully importing and distributing, they did both. And they did the advertising umbrellas that required a bigger turnaround or quicker turnaround time. So they produced those, so producers of value there, and then they were arbitrageurs. They traded imported umbrellas, and they had the distribution channels and distributed that through their distribution channels. I'm starting to see that now as well, is that organizations that are in one are starting to be in both. And I think that's a trend that will last for a long time. Now, I just want to talk here about the concept of core competence and verticals or channels, that as a means to discern whether or not to be opportunistic or not. So what I'm seeing now is that I'm seeing that people are arbitrarily, and it's in the true word, the meaning of the word arbitrary, they're arbitrarily taking on opportunities. And they're not thinking through those. And I think that is going to be a big mistake for those businesses in the long run. So what I'm guiding my CEOs to do is to make sure that they either address that if an opportunity presents, it needs to be able to leverage either your core competencies. I don't have this here, but what I believe are your critical competencies, your components as well, your componentry in your business, or your channels, or basically your distribution, your clients, your distribution channels. So if somebody comes to me with an opportunity and I can't leverage my core competencies, and I can't sell that into my client base, I will not do it. So somebody arrives at this true story, arrives at Race Corp and says, I want to partner with you to produce those like little walk-in through tunnels where they spray you with this sanitizer, and then you can walk into the organization for schools and for government buildings, etc. And we can get Discovery to advertise on it. And can we partner on that? So I go, well, do I have the ability to build tunnels, these things? No, I don't. Do I have Discovery as a client? No. So for me, I said, thank you for the opportunity, but no, thank you. Because I didn't want the learning curve now of building a new competency, nor did I want the learning curve or the time taken to build a new client in that space. If I was going to build a new client, then at least I wanted my core competency in place as well. To go through two learning curves at the same time, I think is a very dangerous strategy. So so much opportunity is presented to me on a weekly basis, I have an ability to discern which opportunities to look at and which not to. And I'm encouraging our CEOs and you to do the same thing. So the next thing is the concept of timing. So to me, the tectonic plates are still shifting, they're still moving, not as much as they were perhaps a month or 2 months ago, but they're still moving. And so the timing and positioning are two things that are very important. The one is if you go too early into a market, and the plates are still moving, you will burn to death. There's still too much lava around, and you'll burn to death. So if you go in too early, you'll burn to death. If you go in too late, it'll be already populated. And then if you're choosing a place in the market, even if you get your timing right, now because the tectonic plates are moving, if you look at the picture on your left there, you'll see there's a tiny little island there. If you chose that little island, it might not be in a good place from a positioning point of view. So in thinking about where you're going to settle, where your strategy is going to settle in the future, but the timing of that strategy and the positioning in the market are going to be critical as well. And that's a little bit more difficult to do, but there's certain things that you can put in place in order to help you, assist you in that regard. There's in scale theory, there's the concept of the network effects, and network effects are effectively proven to be part of all scale journeys. So any business that is scaling will have the concept of network effects, where the ecosystem will resonate in order to allow that business to scale. So if you think about me and Gary's chatting, so it'd be Gary and I having a conversation. I speak to him, he speaks to me. It's two-way. Okay, it's two-way. But if you go to three of us in the room, it goes to 6, because Gary speaks to the third person, I speak to Gary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6. 4 people in the room, 16, 25, 36, etc. So there's this exponentiality around in networks. And what the theory shows, that at some point the system resonates and reverberates and allows you to become successful. So as an example here, if cars were built in an environment where the tires were not being built at the technology around tires wasn't there, and the technology around roads wasn't there, and the technology around fuel wasn't there, then we wouldn't be driving around in cars. They all had to be in a network to allow one technology to dominate over another. And so in order for you to scale, you have to create as many connections as you can. So entrepreneurs are normally good at that. They network all the time. They bring new opportunities and new network nodes into their environment. But at this time, in a place where we're looking at screens, it's very difficult to do that. So I asked now for our CEOs to deliberately ignite network effects, deliberately make contact, deliberately have conversation. It's not going to happen as it did before in a semi-random way. You know, it's not going to happen at the wedding or the funeral, or the party or the whatever the case may be. You're going to have to become deliberate in this. And so there's almost a programmatic approach to building those networks around those businesses, which has been a very, very successful strategy. I'm just very wary of time, and I want to get to Q&A. So I'm going to just pop through a few more. I'm not going to talk right through all the slides here. But if I go into leadership at this time for entrepreneurs, I think there's actually, if you look under create the framework, what it's now 5, there's an additional bullet point which has been added subsequently. But what we need is a framework in order to operate in. Remember, we want predictability, we want to communicate. So what I did with my staff is I created this framework which said, okay, first of all, we're going to preserve cash. And this is how we're going to do it in the business. Then we're going to sell. So this is what we're going to do with our sales team. We're going to protect what we have, in other words, our clients. So we're going to protect all our relationships with our clients. And then we're going to create the new who, the new what, the new how, the new where, the new why. This is all about the newness, about creating new markets. And then the fifth bullet point is we're going to help others. So that became the framework. This was initially the framework in the first week, and then it added the others. So in communicating with my team, with my staff, that was the framework. I did everything and still do everything according to those 5 bullet points. Wherever I can, it's about preserving cash. So I'll give you an example of that. My head of marketing came to me, asked for what my thoughts were around doing this particular training around a piece of software. The first thing I did was go onto YouTube and put in search for, is there any training? And there it is. I saved not a lot of money, but just the mental model was, instead of going to spend that cash, I'd rather, there were 2 or 3 training videos on YouTube, for free. So I preserve cash, sell. I put a mandate on all new hires, except for the sales team, which I'm still building. Protect what we have. It was all about rebuilding relationships and reconnecting with our clients. And the new who, the new how, the new where, the new why was about new products, new markets. And I took control of that. And in this last 3 months, we've created 16 new products within Allon Raiz Corp for our clients. And so that's become a big focus. And helping others is wherever we can contribute with what we have, we've been doing so. So why I'm saying that is that in your leadership in this time, it's about creating the framework so that you have an ability to communicate with your team and staff in a way that they understand why you're doing what you're doing. Let's go through that. So let's stop with questions. I'd rather, we got 25 minutes left, and I'd rather go to the questions. Thanks, Gary. It is normally an hour, but an hour talk, but we've restricted for questions, so I'd rather have the questions.
While the questions are coming in, Allon, just one from me. The big buzzword at the moment is pivoting. Everyone's talking about how you must pivot your business, but you make an interesting observation, or at least you include it in your slides, with regard to not changing everything. You must continue doing what your core business, but pivoting and changing certain elements. Is this correct?
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, I actually wrote an article on pivoting a week before COVID, and I pulled it from being published because of COVID. I wanted to see where it was, because it was too sensitive. Everyone was pivoting. The word pivot became the most widely used word on the internet, in the world, I think, at the time. Everyone was pivoting. And to me, to understand the concept of pivot is to exactly that. Pivot is to pivot off something. It's not about complete change. It's not around Control Alt Delete and start something new. It is about leveraging what you have. And coming back to what my discussion was with my CEOs, it's around It's about use your core competencies. Pivot, you can add core competencies. I've got a view of 80-20. If you're going to do something new, for as much as you can, don't exceed 20% new, right? In this time, perhaps you can go to 30 or even 40%, but beyond 60%, what you're using currently, what you have, you're effectively starting a new learning curve. And in a learning curve, in an environment which is changing, is a dangerous thing, because you might go through all this energy to learn something, and then all of a sudden it's not there anymore. Like now we're on Zoom, right? So we're on Zoom. There's two sort of dominant platforms right now. Zoom took over from Skype in this time, and then there's Teams as well, and there'll be a whole host of other things. So if you were building your platforms on some sort of strategy on one thing, and then all of a sudden COVID sort of dies down and people go back to or Skype comes out with a new thing, you've gone through a whole new learning curve. I don't want to say for nothing, but it's a wasted efficiency. So you try and be as efficient as possible in a crisis and use what you have in a crisis. And what I was seeing was people going into doing completely new things where they had to go through a learning curve, and they got taken out. They got taken out by the market. The guys who went into bringing in masks. You know, they brought in the masks and they were selling them at the time at 25 Rand because there was a supply demand issue. But that price kept dropping and dropping to below that. People were selling below the price that they were buying. Now they're stuck with all the stock, you know. So because they didn't understand that market. Whereas if somebody was manufacturing, you know, something in cloth, they understood the market far better. So that's really what I'm saying, is that this word pivot is overused, and to me it's not understood.
Sure, but of course there were X percentage of businesses that had no choice but to pivot, well, at least to completely make a volte face, because they simply couldn't trade in the current conditions, and they had to look to other things like making masks and making PPE, etc.
Yeah, but if they were making something and then making masks, that to me can be a pivot, because if I know how to manufacture, that's a core competency. I'm still using what I have. I'm talking about the restaurant owner who starts to manufacture masks, okay, who's never manufactured in anything before, never had a team of people who sew, hasn't got a distribution network around. That's what I'm talking about. So if you're going and you were bottling one thing and now you're bottling sanitizer, you're still using core competence. That's pivot, right? That I agree with. But if you never bottled anything, and now you have to go and understand about the bottles and which ones leak and which ones don't, and how to label them and how to distribute them and how to fill them, etc., etc. In a time that's changing, it's a very dangerous. It's not binary that you're always going to fail. But I've just seen so many failures in this time as the tectonic plates have shifted.
Yeah, we've got a question from Emma. She noticed that a trend of businesses having what you mentioned as the arbitrary knee-jerk reaction. All our speakers so far on COBRA have warned against it. They are advising a more focused strategy and have shared many pieces of advice on how to do this. Could you speak a bit more to this point?
Yeah, so to me that comes back to it's about how you look at your core competencies in a different way. So if you looked in my, I've created a war room here in my office at home, and all across my wall are all these sticky notes. I think you can, the top left-hand or right-hand corner, you can see some of them, some of those post-it notes there sitting on top. The whole in front of me, it's all over the place. And what I've done here is I've looked at all my resources. What do I have? And I've categorized that. I've looked at now what are my core competencies. Then I've got on this side, I've got my big questions, the questions that I'm trying to answer, my threats, and in front of me I've got all my opportunities. And how I'm doing this is I'm trying to use what I have, not what I don't have. right? It's what I have, not what I don't have. I'm trying to almost take the same ingredients and combine them in different ways in order to create something new, because I have that in place. And to me, that's about the focus. My focus is not to be outside of what I don't have. So if I don't have something, for as long as I bring in no more in my world, 20% new into that, I feel that I can pivot responsibly and pivot successfully. And this has been a very strong strategy for me, and it's been very successful for me, because all those 16 new products I have produced have not completely broken Race Corp. And what I'm seeing is that in other environments with mates who've got businesses who are doing bizarre things, they've got fast food places, and I understand the reaction, but don't call it a pivot, call it a new business. And then go through that. That's really it's almost like that. It's such an important thing to be honest about that. That's not a pivot. That's a new business. So that business is dead. This is my new business. And then you come to what you have is your skills. So what skills do I have? What network do I have? Again, and once again, if you're going to start the new business, it's about your skills and your network again, which in the same way is about what do I have versus what I don't have.
Yeah. We've got a question from Anonymous. Hi, Allon. What are your views on businesses which have always been at its core a business which required physical presence, i.e. schools, for instance? Do you believe a move to a virtual model is the only way forward? Or is this now a time to take advantage of the downturn in the economy and encourage other businesses to open more yourself?
You know, that's a question I've been tussling with. I own a school. Race Corp owns a school, physical school. We also own an online school. So I'm in both worlds. And I've watched the journey with both of them. If you think about a school, the question is, are schools dead? Or is the concept of a physical school dead? At one level, it seems like it is. But at another level, if you break down the problem in a different way of thinking, a big part of what schools do is they are parentis locus. They keep your children busy out of the house, from 8 to 3 or whatever the case may be. So they are parentis locus. They are acting as parents in that environment. So if you look at from an education point of view, you're right. We can all do it online. We can all educate our kids online. My kids have been doing that now, but we're also hearing through the internet and through our friends that parents are tired of that. They are now, I'm a father and a teacher, a breadwinner. I'm all these things, and the question is, why am I paying the school? And the reason why you're paying the school is they will do probably a better job than you, number one. And number two, the kids need to socialize. So we'll have other issues around socializing problems if kids are not interacting, they want that. So I've got 2 kids. One can't wait to go to school, the young one, because he wants to see his friends. Now they're all in blocks and they can't touch each other, but they can talk and they crave that. So to answer the question about all these models, it's very fantastical and it's very sexy to say things are dead. But it's only when you understand what really the other drivers are that you can make that assertion or not. And that's not just in the schooling environment. It's in all environments. That very often what we perceive as the reason why people use a certain product or service is there's an overt reason, and there is always some underlying reasons as well. And unless the underlying reasons move or shift, then that still has got life beyond it. So a long answer, but there will be new models, there will be hybrid models, and there will be traditional models.
Yeah. From our side, I mean, if you've got some entrepreneurs on the show and they're feeling that they want to give it up, that they feel that there's no chance they're going to survive this pandemic, they simply don't have the cash flow, and financially it's very problematic, they don't see a future. What would you give us 2 or 3 pieces of advice, fundamental pieces of advice for these people that are desperate at this stage?
Okay, I've been there, and I'll tell you my journey with it, and I'll tell you what a subtle difference is at this point. So I'm when it comes to business, I'm pro-life. Okay, so to me, it's about for as long as you can, you try and make sure that you keep that business alive. So I've got a very simple. You mentioned my best-selling books. One of them is What to Do When You Want to Give Up, which was basically me writing about my journey. I actually wrote it around the third person, which I was trying to help in this situation. This was many years ago, but in that character was me, in that character, an amalgam of all the entrepreneurs over the years that I've dealt with that go to that place of wanting to give up. So here's my basic hypothesis. For as long as you can ask different questions and get different answers, you carry on. So it's about learning how to ask different questions. And it's about getting different answers. The moment you can't ask a new question, and the moment you can't get a new answer, then that's the time to give up. So let me illustrate this. So I had a business who was, and I'm gonna mention the industry. I had a business that was in a panel beating business, and this was pre-COVID, and they were being crushed by their competitors, and they had run out of cash and didn't know what to do. And I ran this workshop called Shift Questions, and there was a big guy. And I said this, and he says, "Well, you don't understand. You don't understand." So my question to him was, to everyone in the room was, what would you do if your business could only operate from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and the whole world operated the same way? So I says, well, that's impossible. You know, my workers, blah, blah, blah. I said, this is a hypothetical question. Give me the answer. So, there's lots of resistance. Bottom line, then he says, okay, engage this. And then he's busy writing the answers, and he jumps up and he goes, I've just come up with the answer. I work with corporates, and I basically it's the C-suite and the sales teams, etc. They need their cars during the day. I'll pick up their cars after hours. I'll work on it during the evenings, and then I'll drop it off first thing in the morning. So that became the basis of the idea. That idea morphed, but that became the basis idea, and that then encouraged him to start engaging these corporates with a difference, and his business took off. Now, the point there is that if you don't ask a bizarre question, if you don't ask what I call a shift question, you can't answer those questions with asking the same question. You have to ask another bizarre question. So I've created 100 of these questions. Another one, like for example, I had, what happens if you what happens if you were quadriplegic? How would your business be different if you were quadriplegic? So, and funny enough, I worked with QASA, which is the Quadriplegic Association of South Africa at the time, and I asked the opposite: if you were able-bodied, what would you do? Because to quadriplegic entrepreneurs, so I said, go beyond the first obvious things, okay, and then answer the question. So people say, okay, I would delegate more. I would get more better technology. I would do this. I would do that. I'd do all these things. And I said, well, why don't you do that now? Like, so it basically, when you ask a different question, it gives you a new vista on the problem. And that new window on the problem creates an opportunity for new answers. So that's the first thing that you do. When it comes down to, from a cash point of view, etc., it's about getting the idea to have what I call CERTI, compelling economic right to exist, and then it's almost starting again. It's like starting again from that point. But this time, when you start again, you start with a better network, with more experience, with a lot more scars. Hopefully, it hasn't damaged your confidence. And then you start to build again. And I have built again many times. And entrepreneurs, we like cockroaches. We're survivors. We just keep coming back. We're survivors. and we might not come back in the same form or shape, but we will come back again.
Yeah. There's a question from Danny Kaplan. Should retail businesses continue expanding their retail footprint?
I don't know. I'm not a retail specialist, but this would be my go at it. If that particular type of retail was novel and was growing, yes. If it wasn't, I think the face of retail will change very much to about the experience of retail versus the functionality of retail. So if you are able to create that experience better than anyone else, and you're seeing this particularly in the US, in the shopping malls there, where they become almost Disney worlds of sorts, where they're places to go and have experience and eat and etc. It's about bringing foot traffic. It's about the experience of it. Then the answer would be yes. If you can't do that, then the answer would be no.
Sure. Question from Adam. There's much criticism about the government-backed COVID-19 loans that SMEs can apply for through their bank. The take-up has been very low. What are you at Raiz Corp? What are you and the Raiz Corp SMEs finding? How can the scheme be improved?
I've been quite cynical. Maybe it's wrong. Skeptical. I think that's a more palatable term. I've been very skeptical about first of all, the ability at volume to do this. So the TERS and all those kind of things, I think everyone is just trying their best, and I think it's a good, it's a good way to stimulate the economy if possible. But the numbers have been small, and to me, like that should be cherry on top. It shouldn't be, and I've seen too many people rely on it as opposed to, and it's almost a debilitating thing that I'm going to get it from there. It should be cherry on top. It's saying, best case scenario, I get it. Worst case scenario, I don't. I'm going to operate on the worst case scenario. So what do I do now? So that's been my mindset around it. And it's not about like I'm just waiting for the heavens to open and manna to fall out of the sky.
Sure. Just your final thoughts while we're about 6 minutes away from 11 o'clock. Just your final thoughts, Allon. Where do you see this pandemic going? How long do you expect us to have to hold over, particularly entrepreneurs or small businesses, until we're over the hump? I mean, what is your feeling? You're not a doctor, you're not a scientist, but you are a guy that's taken some risks, come out the other end. What's your feeling about where we're going to be perhaps in 12 months' time?
Yeah, so you see how I started this talking about how humans need for prediction. So we're looking for people who maybe can predict the future, so we can, and we're all looking for that. So as you said, I don't know. I can only but naturally, I have to make certain assumptions on which to build a strategy. My view is that this year it will remain pretty much as it is. There's probability we might even go back up to level 5, if things get out of hand. The government has been acting unpredictably and in some instances irrationally, in my opinion. But so I don't know where that's going to go. I think that'd be incredibly damaging emotionally if we go up to 4 or 5. But of course, what we have to always consider the human costs to this as well. This is a terrible paradox that is impossible to negotiate fairly on both sides, because both sides of the argument are true. So I think this year is I don't want to say a write-off, but I think this year will be pretty much the same. But I think there's going to be a counter movement. And I'm very much part of that, maybe irresponsibly so, that I want to meet people in face to face. So any person who I'm meeting now, I'll ask them. I mean, I'm sitting across a table. I'm at least 2 meters apart. There's masks, there's sanitizer, all that. But I want to see somebody's face. I want to communicate face to face. This whole Zoom thing is wonderful. I'm grateful for it. But to me, I'm in the in the human relationship business. And when I'm speaking to somebody who's physically in front of me for a meeting, it's very different to when I'm seeing them for the first time on a screen. I don't look at, you miss out all the nuances. So if you and a partner were in the room and I was busy talking to you and I was asking you a question, and I would, through my peripheral vision, watch how the partner was looking at you and reacting as part of my assessment about what was going on. I can't do that on Zoom, right? I can't watch body language, what's going on with your hands. I can't watch all that in terms of making my assessment. So I think, and I'm very much part of this, that there'll be almost a counter revolution of people who say, okay, it's all as normal. As long as we're responsible, I want to see people in person. So I see that building. And then I only see probably February, March next year, things starting to feel a little bit, inverted commas, normal. But I don't think certain industries, I think certain industries are going to take a long time to recover. Long time to recover, tourism, the hospitality, etc.
Sure. Allon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on to COBRA and for sharing your thoughts, your fantastic advice. We'll have you back on, that's for sure, in the coming weeks, in the coming months. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us this morning. Tomorrow we've got Pepe Marais, another success story. Pepe himself also struggled at one point and has built an amazing ad agency. If you're an advertising person, please join us tomorrow again at 10 o'clock when we have Pepe Marais on COBRA. Then on Thursday, Dr. Dorian Will, the well-known, renowned psychologist, joins us. She'll be talking about our mental state while running our businesses and, running our lives at this point. All of this very important for young people, older people running their businesses and just struggling at the moment. So join us then tomorrow, 10 o'clock again. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. If you want more advice and from Allon, go to raizcorp.com and also come to COBRA, cobra.org.za, and we can give you a whole lot of advice and put you in touch with the right people. Until tomorrow, goodbye.